Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the human ship called Endeavor and watched the huge alien ship coming toward them. The alien ship was nothing like what humans had ever seen before. It looked like it was made of crystal and glowed with strange light that seemed alive. The ship was almost 3 kilometers long and moved through space without making any sound. Jake had been a space captain for 15 years, but this was his first time meeting aliens. His hands were sweaty inside his gloves and his heart was beating fast. The other crew members on the bridge were also nervous, but they tried to look calm and professional. Amy Parker sat at the communications station and suddenly looked up at Jake. She was young and smart and had joined the crew only 6 months ago. Amy had short brown hair and green eyes that always seemed to be thinking about something important. "Sir, the aliens are trying to talk to us," Amy said in a quiet voice. "The computer is working on translating their language right now," Jake nodded, and straightened his blue uniform. He had been preparing for this moment his whole career, but nothing could have really prepared him for meeting beings from another world. The main screen in front of them started to flicker and change colors. "Put them through, Amy," Jake said and cleared his throat. The screen showed the inside of the alien ship, and Jake saw the strangest beings he had ever imagined. They were very tall and thin, with long arms and legs that seemed to bend in ways that human arms and legs could not bend. Their skin was smooth and shiny like oil on water and changed colors as they moved. The most surprising thing was that each alien had 6 arms instead of 2 like humans. The alien in the front seemed to be their leader. He had 3 eyes that glowed with soft blue light, and when he spoke his voice sounded like music mixed with sadness. The computer translated his words into English that appeared on a small screen next to the main display. "Hello, young species," the alien leader said. "I am High Priest Zethkar of the Veltar people. We have traveled very far from our homeworld to meet the humans who dare to fly their ships into the sacred hunting grounds of the Great Devourer." Jake looked at Dr. Lisa Chun, who was standing next to him. Lisa was the ship's science officer and knew more about alien life than anyone else on the crew. She had long black hair tied back in a neat ponytail and wore thick glasses that made her dark eyes look bigger. Lisa had been studying the possibility of alien life for most of her adult life. "Great Devourer?" Jake asked. "Could you tell us what that is?" The alien priest's skin changed to darker colors and his 3 eyes closed for a moment. When he opened them again, Jake could see something that looked like fear mixed with deep respect. "The Great Devourer is the ancient beast that rules the empty space between the stars," Zethkar explained. "For 10,000 years my people have worshipped its power and magnificence. No living being has ever met the Great Devourer and lived to tell about it. The beast feeds on fear and grows stronger each time it destroys a world." Lisa stepped forward and Jake could see her scientific curiosity taking over her fear. This was exactly the kind of discovery she had always dreamed of making. "Could you show us what this creature looks like?" Lisa asked politely. "It would help us understand what we might be dealing with." The alien priest made a gesture with 4 of his 6 arms, and suddenly the screen filled with an image that made several crew members gasp. The creature was enormous and floated in the darkness of space like a nightmare come to life. It looked like a giant octopus or squid, but was much larger than any sea creature from Earth. The beast had 8 massive tentacles that seemed to move on their own and a huge head with what looked like a sharp beak in the center. The creature's skin was covered with patterns of light that pulsed and changed colors in hypnotic waves. Each tentacle was thick as a subway train and long enough to wrap around a small moon. The head alone was probably bigger than most human buildings. "The Great Devourer is 60 meters long from its beak to the end of its tentacles," Zethkar continued. "Its tentacles can crush the strongest starships like they are made of paper. Its beak can cut through any metal or energy shield. But most terrifying of all is its intelligence. The beast knows when prey is near, and it enjoys the hunt." In the back of the bridge, Bob Miller was standing next to his friend Sam Johnson. Bob was a young crew member who worked in the ship's kitchen and had never seen anything more dangerous than a broken food processor. He leaned over to Sam and whispered something that made Sam try not to laugh. "What did you say, Bob?" Jake asked. Bob's face turned red and he looked embarrassed. Nothing important, sir. I just said that the creature looks like those fried squid rings we serve in the cafeteria. Some of the crew members smiled at this comment, but Jake tried to keep the mood serious. He turned back to the alien priest who was watching the humans with interest. We appreciate the warning about this creature, Jake said diplomatically. Perhaps you could tell us more about where it lives and how we might avoid it. Zethkar's skin patterns changed to show what the computer translated as surprise, mixed with respect. You humans are either very brave or very foolish. Most species flee when they learn of the Great Devourer. But you want to know more about it. Knowledge is how humans survive, Lisa said. The more we understand about something, the better we can deal with it. Then you should know that the Great Devourer lives in the Forbidden Nebula 3 days' journey from here. It has made that region of space its hunting ground for countless centuries. No ship that enters the nebula ever returns. Jake looked around at his crew and saw determination in their faces instead of fear. This was what they had trained for and what they had come to space to find. The unknown was scary, but it was also exciting. Would you be willing to guide us to this nebula? Jake asked. We would like to study this creature from a safe distance. The alien priest was quiet for a long moment, and his skin showed colors that seemed to indicate deep thought mixed with worry. If you are determined to seek death, then we will accompany you. But know that even approaching the sacred hunting grounds is considered blasphemy by many of my people. The Great Devourer is not just a creature to us. It is a god. 3 days later, both ships were moving slowly through a strange cloud of gas and dust that the aliens called the Forbidden Nebula. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge watching the swirling colors outside through the main window. The nebula was beautiful but also scary, with its mix of purple and green gases that seemed to move like they were alive. The alien ship stayed far behind them while the human ship, Endeavor, pushed deeper into the cosmic cloud. Jake could see on his communication screen that High Priest Zethkar looked very worried. The alien skin was showing dark colors that meant fear, and his 3 eyes kept looking around nervously. Kate Wilson sat at the sensor station, and her face was lit up by the glow from her computer screens. She was one of the youngest crew members, but was very good at reading the ship's instruments. Kate had blonde hair and a short cut and blue eyes that were always focused on her work. Captain, I'm reading something big ahead of us, Kate said without looking up from her screens. The computer shows massive life signs moving through the nebula. Jake walked over to look at Kate's readings. The numbers on the screen were much higher than anything they had seen before. How big are we talking about, Kate? About 62 meters long, sir, and the computer says it weighs as much as a small building. It's definitely alive and moving toward us. On the communication screen, High Priest Zethkar appeared, and his skin was now flashing with colors that meant panic. Behind him, other aliens were moving around quickly and seemed to be preparing for something terrible. Commander Morrison, you must turn your ship around right now, Zethkar said in a voice that sounded like he was trying not to scream. The Great Devourer is waking up from its sleep. Our instruments show that it knows you are here. Jake looked at his crew and saw that they were all watching him carefully. They trusted him to make the right decision, but he could see they were scared too. Dr. Lisa Chun was standing next to him with her tablet computer in her hands, and her eyes were bright with excitement instead of fear. Jake, this is the discovery of a lifetime, Lisa whispered to him. We might be the first humans to see a completely new form of life. Before Jake could answer, Kate called out from her station. Sir, something is coming out of the nebula. It's huge. The main screen switched to show the view ahead of their ship, and everyone on the bridge became very quiet. The creature that emerged from the swirling gas was exactly like the image the aliens had shown them, but seeing it in real life was completely different. It was enormous beyond anything Jake had imagined. The Great Devourer looked like a giant octopus that could live in the vacuum of space. Its skin was dark but covered with patterns of light that pulsed in waves of blue and green and purple. The creature's 8 tentacles moved through space, like they were swimming through water, and each one was thick enough to wrap around their entire ship. The creature's head was massive, with 2 large eyes that seemed to look right at them. Jake could see intelligence in those eyes, and that was somehow more frightening than if the creature had looked like a mindless beast. Below the eyes was a beak that looked like it could cut through metal as easily as scissors cut paper. "It's beautiful," Lisa whispered, and Jake realized she was right. Despite being terrifying, the creature was also graceful and magnificent as it moved through the nebula. The Great Devourer's tentacles reached toward the human ship, and Jake felt the entire vessel shake as they made contact with the hull. He waited for the crushing grip that would destroy them, but instead the touch was gentle, almost like the creature was trying to examine them without causing harm. "Sir, I'm picking up some kind of signals from the creature," Amy Parker said from her communication station. "It's not like normal radio, but the computer thinks it might be trying to communicate with us." Jake raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Can you figure out what it's saying?" "It's very basic, sir, like whale songs, but using electromagnetic waves instead of sound. The computer is trying to translate it now." Through the ship's speakers came a deep sound that seemed to vibrate through the metal walls and into their bones. It was haunting and beautiful and completely unlike anything any human had ever heard before. The sound lasted for almost a minute and then faded away on the communication screen. High Priest Zethkar was staring with his 3 eyes wide open. His skin had changed to colors that meant amazement mixed with religious awe. "The Great Devourer speaks," Zethkar said in a voice full of wonder. "In 10,000 years of worship, no Veltar has ever heard the voice of our God. This is the most sacred moment in our history." Dr. Lisa Shun was already working on her tablet computer, analyzing the signals they had received. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, and Jake could see she was discovering something important. "Jake, this creature isn't acting like a predator at all," Lisa said quietly, so only he could hear. "Look at these readings. Its brain activity shows curiosity, not hunger. Its body language is exploratory, not aggressive. I think it's just interested in us." Jake looked back at the creature, which was now floating peacefully next to their ship. One of its tentacles was gently touching their hull while the others moved in slow patterns that seemed almost like a dance. The lights on its skin pulsed in rhythm with the electromagnetic signals it was sending. "Are you saying this thing isn't dangerous?" Jake asked. "I'm saying it doesn't seem to want to hurt us. Look at how careful it's being with its tentacles. Something this size could crush us easily, but it's being very gentle." Bob Miller was standing near the back of the bridge next to Sam Johnson and some other crew members. Bob was looking out the window at the creature with a thoughtful expression on his face. "You know what this reminds me of?" Bob said to his friends. "My uncle used to take me fishing for giant octopus off the coast of California. The big ones. We're always curious about divers and would come up to investigate, but they never hurt anyone unless they felt threatened." Sam laughed quietly. "Yeah, but your uncle's octopus wasn't 60 meters long." "True, but the behavior is the same. This thing is just checking us out to see if we're dangerous or interesting." Dr. Lisa Chun heard this conversation and turned to look at Bob with new interest. "Bob, what did you just say about octopus behavior?" "Just that they're usually pretty peaceful unless something scares them. The big ones especially tend to be curious about new things." Lisa looked back at her readings and then at the creature outside. "Jake, what if the Veltar have been wrong about this creature for 10,000 years? What if it's not a dangerous predator, but just a very large, peaceful animal that lives in space?" Jake considered this possibility as he watched the Great Devourer continue its gentle exploration of their ship. The creature's movements were slow and careful, and its electromagnetic songs seemed more like friendly greetings than threats. "If that's true, then we might be looking at the biggest misunderstanding in galactic history," Jake said. The discovery happened on the 3rd day of watching the Great Devourer. Dr. Lisa Chun had been studying the creature's behavior patterns when she found something that changed everything. She had been working in the ship's science lab for hours, without taking a break, and her eyes were red from staring at computer screens. Lisa walked quickly to Jake Morrison's private office and knocked on the door. When Jake opened it, he could see excitement mixed with disbelief on her face. She was holding her tablet computer and had papers scattered in her other hand. Jake, I need to tell you something important, Lisa said as she walked into the small room. I've been studying the creature's biology and behavior for 3 days now. Jake sat down in his chair and gestured for Lisa to sit across from him. He could tell from her voice that whatever she had discovered was going to be significant. What did you find, Lisa? Jake, this creature isn't some cosmic horror like the aliens believe. It's basically a space whale that feeds on the gases in the nebula and radiation from nearby stars. It's completely harmless to anything larger than a small fish. Jake leaned back in his chair and tried to process what Lisa was telling him. You're saying the Veltar have been worshipping what's essentially a really big sea animal, more like a really big squid, but yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And here's the most interesting part, Jake. The creature's meat would be incredibly nutritious for both humans and probably for the Veltar too. The way it processes cosmic radiation means its tissue is packed with rare minerals and proteins that are very hard to find anywhere else. Jake stood up and walked to the small window. In his office, he could see the great devourer floating peacefully outside the ship. Its tentacles moved slowly through space, and the lights on its skin pulsed in gentle rhythms that seemed almost like breathing. Lisa, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I'm just saying that from a scientific standpoint, this creature represents an incredible opportunity for research. And if it's nearing the end of its natural lifespan, like my readings suggest, then harvesting it could provide food and materials for both our species. Meanwhile, on the bridge, the crew had become very comfortable with their massive visitor. The creature seemed to enjoy having the human ship nearby, and often positioned itself where the external cameras could get the best view of its bioluminescent displays. Chief Engineer Ryan Davis was standing near the main window watching the creature's tentacles move in what looked like a slow dance. Ryan was a big man with gray hair and hands that were always dirty from working on the ship's engines. He had grown up on a farm and understood animals better than most people. You know what this reminds me of, Ryan said to the other crew members around him. My grandfather used to take me fishing for giant Pacific octopus off the coast of Oregon. Biggest one we ever caught was about 20 feet long. Made the best calamari my grandmother ever cooked. Bob Miller was standing nearby and laughed at Ryan's comment. 20 feet, huh? This thing has got to be 200 feet easy. Imagine the size of the dinner you could make from just one tentacle. The comment was meant as a joke, but Dr. Lisa Chun had just walked back onto the bridge and overheard what Bob said. She stopped walking and turned to look at him with sudden interest. Bob, what did you just say about making dinner from the tentacle? No, before that. About catching it. Jake walked over from his office and could sense where this conversation was heading. He had known Lisa long enough to recognize when she was developing one of her scientific theories. Lisa, please tell me you're not thinking what I think you're thinking. Jake, we're carrying a full set of deep space fishing equipment for collecting samples from gas giant atmospheres. The harpoon systems could be modified to work on something this size. We are absolutely not going to kill their god and eat it. Why not, Jake? It's just a really big space squid. And according to my biological readings, it's nearing the end of its natural lifespan anyway. In probably 6 months, it's going to die of old age. Ryan Davis walked over to join the conversation. Doc, are you seriously suggesting we could catch that thing? The equipment is designed to handle large specimens in zero-gravity environments. With some modifications to increase the power output, we could definitely harvest it, Jake repeated. Lisa, that's their deity. We can't just turn the Veltar god into calamari. It's not really their god though, Jake. It's an animal that they've been misunderstanding for 10,000 years. Maybe it's time someone showed them the truth. Amy Parker looked up from her communication station. Sir, I've been monitoring the Veltar communications channels. They're not all in agreement about the creature's divine status. There's been a big theological debate going on for centuries. What kind of debate? Jake asked. The younger generation of Veltar have been questioning why their god never answers prayers or helps them in wars or does anything except float around eating space gas. Some of them think it might just be a really impressive animal. Jake rubbed his forehead where he was getting a headache. So we're dealing with an alien religious crisis. More like an alien scientific revolution, Lisa said. Maybe we're the ones who are supposed to help them figure out the truth. The discussion was interrupted when the great devourer suddenly moved one of its tentacles in a playful gesture that accidentally bumped into one of the ship's sensor arrays. The impact wasn't hard enough to cause serious damage, but it left behind a small piece of the creature's tissue stuck to the damaged equipment. Well, that settles it, Lisa said as she watched the tissue sample on her screen. We now have actual physical evidence to study. Jake sighed and knew that Lisa would not let this opportunity pass. Fine, but we're just going to analyze the sample. We are not going to hunt their god, Lisa smiled and hurried toward the science lab. Of course, Jake. Just analysis, but Jake could see the excitement in her eyes and knew that Lisa had already made up her mind about what they should do with the great devourer. He followed her to the lab and watched as she carefully prepared the tissue sample for examination. Jake, you need to see this, Lisa called out after running the sample through several different tests. I've analyzed the creature's tissue composition and prepared a small edible sample. Jake looked at the tiny piece of what appeared to be translucent meat on the laboratory plate. Please tell me you didn't cook part of their god. I just ran it through the basic food preparation system. Jake, the protein structure is incredible. This could solve food shortages for both species. Against his better judgment, Jake found himself tasting the sample. His eyes widened in surprise. This actually tastes amazing, right? It's like a combination of the finest seafood and the most tender beef. The texture is perfect and the flavor is completely unique. Jake had to admit that the sample was delicious, but he was still worried about the implications. Lisa, even if this tastes good, we can't just kill the creature the aliens worship. But what if we could convince them that it's not really a god? What if we could show them that their ancient belief system has been based on a misunderstanding? Jake looked out the lab window at the great devourer floating peacefully in the nebula. The creature seemed happy and content just existing in its cosmic environment. But he also knew that Lisa's scientific curiosity was rarely wrong about these things. The big argument started in the conference room and lasted for hours. All the senior officers of the ship were sitting around the long table, and everyone had different opinions about what they should do with the great devourer. Jake Morrison sat at the head of the table and listened to his crew debate the most unusual ethical problem any of them had ever faced. Look, Captain, Chief Engineer Ryan Davis said as he leaned forward in his chair. We've got 300 people on this ship, and our protein makers have been breaking down since we left Earth. This creature could feed our entire crew for months and probably help the aliens too. It's their god, Ryan? Jake replied. We can't just turn their deity into dinner, no matter how practical it might be. Dr. Lisa Chin had her tablet computer open and was showing biological charts to anyone who would look at them. Jake, from a purely scientific standpoint, this creature is remarkable. Its tissue could provide insights into how life adapts to living in space. Plus, the nutritional value is better than anything we have on Earth. Lieutenant Amy Parker raised her hand like she was in school. Sir, I've been listening to the Veltar communications, and they're not all in agreement about the creature being a god. There's been a big theological debate going on for hundreds of years. What kind of debate, Amy? Jake asked. The younger Veltar have been questioning why their god never answers prayers or helps them with anything important. They think it might just be a really big animal that their ancestors started worshipping because they were scared of it. Jake rubbed his temples and felt a headache coming on. So we're dealing with an alien religious civil war, more like alien enlightenment, Lisa suggested. Maybe it's time someone showed them that their god is actually just biology. The debate continued until something happened that changed everything. The great devourer was floating peacefully next to their ship when it decided to play with one of the external sensors. The creature's tentacle bumped the equipment gently, but the impact damaged the sensor array and left behind a larger piece of tissue than the first sample. Well, that decides it, Lisa said as she watched the new tissue sample on her screen. We now have enough material for proper testing. Jake knew that once Lisa got an idea in her head, there was no stopping her. Fine, but we're only going to study the sample. We are not going to hunt down a creature that an entire alien species Considered sacred, Lisa was already hurrying to the ship's kitchen where Chef Maria Santos worked. Maria was a small woman with dark hair who had been cooking for space crews for over 10 years. She knew how to make good food from almost anything and was always excited to try new ingredients. "Maria, I need your help with something," Lisa said, as she brought the tissue sample into the kitchen. "I want you to prepare this using traditional earth cooking methods." Maria looked at the strange, translucent meat and raised her eyebrows. "What kind of animal is this from, Doc?" "It's from the creature outside." "The one the aliens call the Great Devourer." Maria's eyes got wide. "You want me to cook their god?" "I want you to cook a piece of space squid that happens to be very large." "Can you do it?" Maria nodded and started working with the sample. She added garlic and butter and a little bit of lemon juice like she would with any seafood. The smell that filled the kitchen was incredible, and soon other crew members started coming to see what was cooking. "This smells better than anything I've ever made," Maria said as she worked. "The texture is perfect and it's taking the seasonings beautifully." The aroma spread through the ship and even reached the bridge where the alien communication was still open. Some of the Veltar on their ship started asking what the smell was and why it was making them feel hungry. High Priest Zethkar appeared on the communication screen, and his skin was showing colors that meant confusion mixed with interest. "Commander Morrison, what is that aroma coming from your ship?" Jake tried to think of a diplomatic way to explain what was happening. "We're preparing some food in our kitchen. The smell is affecting my crew in ways I have never seen before. Some of them are saying it smells like the most wonderful thing they have ever experienced." On the Veltar ship, a younger alien pushed past Zethkar and appeared on the screen. "I am Scholar Kickstall, and I represent the young thinkers among our people. Commander Morrison, are you cooking flesh from the Great Devourer?" Jake looked at Lisa, who nodded encouragingly. "We're testing a small sample that was accidentally left on our equipment. This is blasphemy of the highest order," Zethkar protested, but his skin colors showed that he was also curious about the smell. "Actually," Scholar Kickstall said, "this might prove what we young Veltar have believed for a long time. If the Great Devourer was truly divine, then its flesh would not smell like food to us." Chef Maria appeared on the bridge carrying a plate with the cooked sample. The smell was so good that even Jake had to admit his mouth was watering. The meat looked like the finest seafood he had ever seen, and the aroma was a mixture of ocean and something completely new. "Captain, this is the best protein I have ever worked with," Maria said proudly. "The flavor is complex, the texture is perfect, and the nutritional content is extraordinary." On the communication screen, more young Veltar were gathering behind Scholar Kickstall. Their skin patterns showed excitement and curiosity instead of the fear and reverence that the older aliens displayed. "Perhaps," Scholar Kickstall said carefully, "we have been wrong about the Great Devourer for 10,000 years. "Perhaps it was. Never meant to be worshipped, but understood. You speak madness," High Priest Zethkar said, but his voice was less certain than before. "Do I?" Scholar Kickstall replied. "Look at the creature. It has shown no divine powers. It does not answer prayers or grant miracles. It simply exists like any other animal. And now we see that it can provide sustenance just like any other creature." Jake could see that the aliens were having their own crisis of faith. The younger Veltar seemed excited by the possibility that their ancient beliefs might be wrong, while the older ones were struggling to maintain their traditional views. "What if we could arrange a proper ceremony?" Jake suggested. "Something that honors the creature while also acknowledging what it really is." "You mean kill our god and eat it with proper ritual?" Zethkar asked. "I mean respect a magnificent animal and use its natural death to benefit both our species," Lisa corrected. "My readings show the creature is very old and will die naturally within months anyway." Scholar Kickstall's skin showed patterns that meant deep thinking. "Among my people, there is an old saying that the greatest honor we can give to any creature is to understand its true nature rather than fear it." The discussion that followed involved both species and lasted for hours. The young Veltar were eager to embrace a new understanding of their universe, while the older ones struggled with abandoning beliefs that had shaped their culture for millennia. But the smell of Maria's cooking continued to drift through both Ships, and even the most traditional Veltar had to admit that their bodies were responding to it as if it was the most wonderful food they had ever encountered. Perhaps, Scholar Kickstall finally said, the Great Devourer's greatest gift to us is not divine protection, but the lesson that we should seek understanding rather than worship fear. The news about the tissue sample spread through both ships very quickly, and the reactions were immediate and divided. High Priest Zethkar appeared on the communication screen, and his skin was flashing with colors that the computer translated as religious anger mixed with confusion. "You have consumed the flesh of the divine," Zethkar said in a voice that shook with emotion. "This is the greatest blasphemy in the history of our people. The great devourer will punish us all for this terrible act," but before he could say more, another Veltar pushed into view of the camera. This alien was younger than Zethkar, and his skin showed different patterns that meant excitement and scientific curiosity. Scholar Kickstall looked directly at the human crew and spoke with confidence. "I am Scholar Kickstall, and I represent the new thought movement among our people," he said. "We have suspected for many generations that the Great Devourer was simply a large animal. This human action proves what we have believed for so long. It proves nothing except their barbaric nature." Zethkar protested, but his voice was less certain than before. Dr. Lisa Chun stepped forward with her tablet computer showing all the biological data she had collected. "Actually, it proves quite a lot. The tissue shows no signs of divine energy or supernatural properties or anything beyond the normal biology of a very large space-dwelling cephalopod. It's just an animal, even if it's an impressive one." The argument that followed was broadcast live to both ship crews, and everyone could hear the theological debate happening among the Veltar. The alien crew was clearly split between those who wanted to keep their traditional beliefs and those who were excited about this new scientific evidence. "If it's just an animal," asked a young Veltar voice from somewhere off camera, "then why have we wasted 10,000 years worshipping it instead of studying it?" "Because," Scholar Kickstall replied, "fear and ignorance are easier than knowledge and understanding. The humans show us that even the most frightening creature can be approached with science and reason instead of superstition." Chef Maria Santos had been working quietly in the kitchen during all this discussion, and now she emerged carrying a large platter that filled the air with an incredible aroma. She had taken the tissue sample and prepared it using her best cooking techniques with garlic and butter and herbs that made even the hardest stomachs start rumbling with hunger. "Captain, I've prepared the sample using traditional Earth methods," Maria announced proudly. "This is honestly the finest protein I have ever worked with. The texture is perfect, the flavor is complex, and the nutritional profile is better than anything in our food stores." The smell filled the bridge and somehow transmitted through the communication system to the Veltar ship. Jake could see on his screen that even the alien crew members were reacting to the aroma in ways that suggested their bodies recognized it as food rather than something sacred. "The flesh of the sacred one has been transformed," whispered one young Veltar in what sounded like awe. "It's been seasoned," Jake corrected gently. "Maria is our chef, and she knows how to prepare protein in ways that bring out the natural flavors." Several of the younger Veltar began crowding around their communication screen, and Jake could see that they were very interested in what the humans had done. Even some of the older aliens seemed curious despite their religious concerns. "Perhaps," Scholar Kickstall said thoughtfully, "we have been approaching our relationship with the Great Devourer incorrectly for all these centuries. Instead of worship, maybe we should have been learning about sustainable harvesting and proper preparation techniques." High Priest Zethkar made a sound that the computer could not translate but seemed to indicate shock at this suggestion. "You speak of harvesting the divine as if it were a crop to be gathered. I speak of understanding reality instead of clinging to ancient fears," Scholar Kickstall replied. "The humans have shown us that knowledge is more powerful than worship, and that understanding leads to better outcomes than blind faith." Dr. Lisa Chun was monitoring the Great Devourer through the ship's sensors, and suddenly she looked up with an expression of concern mixed with scientific interest. "Jake, I'm reading some changes in the creature's life signs. It's still stable, but the cellular breakdown I detected earlier is accelerating." What does that mean? Jake asked. It means this creature is very old and approaching the end of its natural lifespan. According to my calculations, it will die naturally within the next few weeks, whether we do anything or not. This information changed everything for both species. High Priest Zethkar's skin showed colors that meant deep sadness mixed with acceptance. If the Great Devourer is truly dying, then perhaps its time of watching over us is coming to an end, he said quietly. Or perhaps, Scholar Kickstall suggested, its death could mark the beginning of a new relationship between our species. Instead of mourning the loss of a false god, we could celebrate gaining new knowledge and new friends. Bob Miller, who had been listening to all this discussion from the back of the bridge, suddenly spoke up. You know, on Earth we have ceremonies around harvesting food. Native peoples would thank the animal for its sacrifice and honor its life even while using it for sustenance. Maybe that's what's needed here. The suggestion seemed to resonate with both human and Veltar crew members. Jake could see that even High Priest Zethkar was considering the possibility of a ceremony that could honor the creature while also acknowledging what it really was. A ceremony that honors both old beliefs and new understanding, Scholar Kickstall said. We could thank the Great Devourer for teaching us truth while also celebrating the friendship between our species. Chef Maria had been listening to this conversation, and now she approached Jake with a thoughtful expression. Captain, if we're going to do this ceremony properly, then we should prepare the food in a way that honors both cultures. I could work with the Veltar. Food prepares to create something that combines human cooking techniques with their traditions. Jake looked around at his crew and saw that they were all watching him carefully. This was perhaps the most important decision he had ever made as a captain, and it would affect the relationship between two species for generations to come. If we do this, Jake said slowly, it has to be done with complete respect for both the creature and the Veltar beliefs. We're not just harvesting food, we're potentially changing the course of an entire civilization's understanding of their universe. Scholar Kickstall's skin showed patterns that meant agreement and hope. Commander Morris and I believe this could be the most important moment in Veltar history. We have the chance to move from ignorance to knowledge, from fear to friendship, and from worship to understanding. High Priest Zethkar was quiet for a long moment, and then his skin showed colors that meant resignation mixed with curiosity. If the Great Devourer is truly dying, and if this can bring peace between our peoples, then perhaps we should consider this ceremony. But it must be done with the highest respect and the greatest care. Jake nodded and felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. Then let's plan a ceremony that honors everyone involved and maybe creates something beautiful from this situation. The ceremony that brought two species together happened on the fourth day after the great theological debate. Both ships moved closer to the Great Devourer, which was now floating peacefully in the center of the nebula. The creature seemed to sense that something important was happening, and its bioluminescent patterns pulsed more slowly, as if it was at peace with whatever was coming. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge watching as teams from both ships prepared for the most unusual funeral and harvest ceremony in galactic history. Dr. Lisa June had confirmed that the creature's life signs were failing rapidly, and it would die naturally within hours whether they intervened or not. The Great Devourer is ready, Scholar Kickstall announced from the Veltar ship. Our instruments show that it has accepted its time and is no longer afraid. High Priest Zethkar appeared on the communication screen, and his skin showed colors that meant sadness mixed with acceptance and perhaps even a little curiosity. If we are going to do this thing, then it must be done with the highest honor and respect for the life that has existed in our galaxy for so many centuries. The ceremony began with both species acknowledging the creature's life and its place in the universe. The Veltar sang ancient songs about the beauty of space and the mystery of life, while the humans shared stories about their own traditions of honoring the animals that provided them with sustenance. We thank you for teaching us that fear and knowledge cannot exist in the same place, Scholar Kickstall said as he addressed the Great Devourer. You have shown us that understanding is more powerful than worship, and that friendship between species is possible when we seek truth together. The creature's death was peaceful and natural, Its bioluminescent patterns gradually faded to a soft glow and then to darkness as its massive heart stopped beating. There was no violence or struggle, just the quiet ending of a very long life in the cold beauty of space. "It is finished? Hi," Priest Zethkar said quietly. "The great devourer has passed from this existence into whatever comes next." The harvesting process was done with care and respect, using the modified equipment from both ships. Every part of the creature was utilized and nothing was wasted. The humans provided the technical expertise while the Veltar offered ceremonial guidance to ensure everything was done properly. Chef Maria Santos worked alongside Veltar food preparers to create a feast that honored both cultures. She taught them human cooking techniques, while they shared their knowledge of spices and preparation methods that had been developed over thousands of years. "This is the most important meal I have ever prepared," Maria said as she worked with the alien chefs. "We're not just cooking food, we're creating the foundation for friendship between our peoples." The Veltar had never experienced flavor and texture like this before. Their traditional diet consisted mainly of nutrient paste and simple processed foods. When they tasted the properly prepared meat from the great devourer, their reactions were immediate and powerful. "This is what food can be," said a young Veltar cook as he tasted a sample. "No wonder the humans have developed such complex cultures when they can create experiences like this." The feast took place on both ships simultaneously with live communication links so everyone could participate together. Jake sat at the head table on the human ship while Scholar Kickstal and even High Priest Zethkar joined the meal from their vessel. To the great devourer, Jake raised his glass in a toast. "Who taught us that sometimes the most sacred thing we can do is come together over a shared meal?" The Veltar delegation, many of whom had never consumed anything with real flavor, discovered the joy of taste and the social bonding that happens when people eat together. Even High Priest Zethkar had to admit that the experience was more meaningful than any religious ceremony he had ever conducted. "Perhaps," Zethkar said slowly, "the greatest revelation is not that our God was mortal, but that mortals can create something divine through cooperation and understanding." As the meal continued, the conversation flowed between the two species in ways that formal diplomacy had never achieved. They shared stories about their homeworlds, their families, and their dreams for the future. The barrier between human and alien seemed to disappear over plates of perfectly prepared cosmic calamari. Dr. Lisa Shan made the final official log entry about their mission while the feast was still going on. "We came to this nebula seeking scientific knowledge and found theological revolution. We offered the aliens our friendship, and they gave us their God. In return, we showed them that the most sacred act in any culture is sharing food and fellowship." 3 months later, the first interspecies restaurant opened on Earth Station, Alpha, serving what the menu called traditional Veltar sacred calamari, alongside human delicacies. The reviews were universally positive, though several food critics noted that the cultural significance of the meal was as complex as its incredible flavor. The Veltar, meanwhile, had completely changed their relationship with the universe around them. They abandoned their worship of space creatures in favor of studying and understanding them. Their new philosophy became simple but profound. If something exists, it can be understood, and if it can be understood, it can be appreciated, and if it can be appreciated, it can probably be prepared in a variety of delicious ways. Bob Miller, who had started the whole conversation about cosmic calamari, was promoted to head of the new interspecies culinary exchange program. His job was to help establish restaurants and food-sharing programs throughout human and Veltar space. "Who would have thought," Bob said during his first official speech, "that the key to galactic peace would turn out to be really good cooking and the willingness to try new things?" Scholar Kickstal became the first Veltar ambassador to Earth and spent most of his time studying human food culture and cooking techniques. He wrote several books about how cuisine could be used as a tool for diplomacy and understanding between different species. High Priest Zethkar surprised everyone by becoming one of the most enthusiastic supporters of the new relationship between the species. He established the first Veltar cooking school and spent his remaining years teaching young aliens that understanding the natural world was more rewarding than fearing it. The great Devourer's legacy lived on not as an object of worship, but as the foundation of an alliance built on mutual respect, scientific curiosity, and really excellent food. Its sacrifice had taught both species that the universe was full of wonders waiting to be discovered, understood, and when appropriate, properly seasoned, and shared with friends, Jake Morrison returned to Earth as a hero, but he always said that the real heroes were the brave individuals from both species who were willing to question old beliefs and embrace new possibilities. The mission reports confused Earth Command for years, but eventually everyone agreed that first contact had been achieved in the most unlikely and successful way possible. Years later, when diplomatic historians studied the first human-alien alliance, they always noted that it succeeded not because of grand political gestures or military might, but because two species discovered they could sit down together and share a meal. The Great Devourer had become something much more important than a god. It had become a symbol of what was possible when different peoples chose understanding over fear and cooperation over conflict.